When I'm gone, they'll just find another monster.
What was Red Dead Redemption about? Well, I don't mean to flex my game design knowledge, but it was about redemption. Yeah, I know. You took control of John Marston, a former outlaw turned family man. His family is taken by the federal government and would only be freed once John arrested or killed his former outlaw buddies. There was an honor system and constant random events that centered around this theme of redemption. You could act like the outlaw John used to be, or you, with John's actions in your control, could redeem him. The mechanics and the story were both focused on redemption. The ending of the game is one of my favorites. You kill your former gang leader and go back home to your family and farm. The game's pacing slows down here, and you see the life that John escaped his violent past to. You see the family life that you'd been spending the whole game trying to recapture, but it wasn't over. The government comes and kills John for his crimes that he had committed in a past that I had no part in. John Marston was a victim of circumstance, a man without a father figure who latched on to a criminal who gave him the paternal support that he never had. But he was also a criminal. After his youth spent as an outlaw, would it be justice to let John live out the rest of his days on a farm with his family? He'd been redeemed, at least I thought so, but what is redemption worth? You can do all the good deeds you want when you're in control of John, but that does not take away what he did. The past is a cruel and inalterable thing. Well, Mr. Monahan, we found the man that killed your father. Oh, good. Where is he? Well, oh wow, how do I put this?
He's been redeemed.
He's been redeemed, Mr. Monahan. Hold on. He shot my father. I watched the life leave his eyes.
Well, he's trying to do right by his boy Jack.
He's doing right by his boy. I don't give a shit who he's doing right by. My father's death led to my mother's opium addiction, my misspent youth, and now I don't know how a father's supposed to act, so my own son is fucked up beyond repair. I caught him fucking a dead raccoon out back behind the shed. How do I deal with that? That goddamn John Marston ruined my life. Well, he is white, so...
Our hands are tied.
Yeah, not much we can do. Really, Mr. Monahan, what's more important? Justice or redemption? Justice! Justice is more important! You're fucking lawmen! Your job is to deliver justice! John was no longer dangerous. He no longer wanted to hurt people, but he had hurt people. Or at least stood by while they were hurt by his fellow gang members. It's easy to forget that while you ride around and save innocents. Hell, he had forgotten that.
Hello, John. John Marston.
Do I know you?
I hope so. I seem to know you.
I'm pretty good at remembering faces.
Are you? Do you remember Hattie McCourt's face?
Who?
She was a girl Dutch Vanderlyn shot in the head on that raid on the ferry a few years back. Same one you got shot on. Pretty girl, until her eye was hanging out by a thread of tendon and her brain was plastered over a wall.
Not really.
Then why would you remember me, friend? You've forgotten far more important people than me.
Was the tragedy of Red Dead Redemption that John was killed, despite all the good he had done? The fact that he alone did not pay for his sins, but his son did as well? Or was the tragedy of Red Dead Redemption the fact that John had to be killed for what he'd done? The death of John resulted in Jack growing up to be the very thing his father regretted being and spent the entire game trying to undo, but is it right that John should be allowed to live a life of peace after years of inflicting violence? I think the big question that Red Dead Redemption probably unintentionally asked is, does redemption really matter?
Stand unshaken amidst the crash of worlds. May I stand unshaken amidst the crash of worlds.
The writing in Cyberpunk 2077 is strong, particularly from a character standpoint. I knew from the marketing that Jackie was gonna die, but God help me, I got attached. That alone is pretty impressive. There's a bit during his funeral where you go to his old home looking for something to put on his ofrenda. An ofrenda is like what a scrapbook is to a white person, except the pictures are keepsakes and the scrapbook is a memorial to a dead Mexican. Fuck! I'm so woke! I nailed that! You talk to his girlfriend, you reminisce, and it was honestly really heartfelt. Something that in most games would feel like a boring side quest that should be skipped over, instead feels like a highlight, a moment where the neon and the guns fade away, and instead the game indulges in a human, character-driven moment that just has no place in a marketing sizzle reel. Once you leave Jackie's old home after convincing Misty to reconcile with Jackie's mother,
Meaning?
Packed my bags and hopped on a plane.
it gets interrupted by some call from an NPC that drowns her out. This obviously was not by design. This just triggered at an awkward time that interrupted something that I was really engaged in. But the guy that called is he's not a fixer, but he's much like the fixers that pepper the game. In that the game tells me to press T to accept the call, but will always be picked up regardless of whether or not I press the fucking key.
To the call.
That noise, it's too loud. Can we just turn it down a touch?
We cannot.
Every time you enter a new area, a fixer calls you and tells you that he offers a myriad of side missions that pepper the game's map. These fixers are constantly calling you, but what do their missions consist of? You go to an icon, you kill a guy, or maybe a few guys, and you get money and experience points. It is standard, boilerplate, boring open world design, the type of open world crafted by the old masters themselves. Ubisoft. Step 1, build map. Step 2, fill map with icons. Step 3, mission accomplished. The world is now living and breathing, whatever the fuck that's supposed to mean. Stop saying that in your marketing. There are some interesting quests at these icons. A guy whose dong implant went haywire, a monk that was kidnapped by an augmentation-obsessed gang and was forced into being augmented, an AI-directed taxi company that is gaining self-awareness. Those missions flesh out the world a bit, offer some interesting choices, and are fun distractions. They're not the best side quests ever, but they're fun and leverage the cyberpunk setting in a way that tells interesting stories. But these fixer missions are not fun and exist in every open world game, and wow, there are a lot of them. And they are completely indiscernible from the quality content that is here. You just never know what these icons hold until you actually trigger them. Why? I was meeting with Rogue, while Johnny, who knew her when he was still alive, watched our conversation and reminisced. Rogue, of course, did not know that a construct of her old friend, Johnny, lived in my head. I loved this conversation, the atmosphere of the club, the tension in the air, the sorta dramatic irony of Rogue not knowing how I always seem to know the exact right thing to say, because her long-dead friend was telling me what to say. And during the entire conversation, 2 NPCs were locked in the generic cowering in fear animation. I'd committed a crime outside the bar. You can't have a living and breathing world without some sort of wanted system, right? So in Cyberpunk, when you commit a crime, the cops will start shooting you and you drive away. They do not chase you, there are no lasting consequences for your reputation. When there are no consequences, choice does not matter. If that could be tattooed on the faces of all game developers, that would be great. A cause is only as important as its effect, and there is no effect from committing crimes beyond getting shot at for as long as it takes to just leave. Anyway, the NPCs actually don't have bad AI. They have no AI. Sure, they'll run, which is something, but much of the time they'll just cower in place. Which is what these NPCs were doing. Some NPC offering me a mission I don't want to do interrupted a genuinely heartfelt side quest which had me engaged with the game. The wanted system interrupted a conversation that had me engaged with the game. I'm hooked. The game has got me. And then what the game is interrupted by what it wants to be. I judge a game in essentially 2 ways. How well did this game accomplish what it set out to do, and is it, fun or engaging? So what is Cyberpunk 2077 trying to do? Is it supposed to be a sandbox? If so, it failed. The fun part of a sandbox is breaking the rules and experimenting with what the game has given you. The wanted system is a joke, so breaking the rules isn't fun, and the combat blows for reasons I'll get into later, so the various tools at your disposal aren't fun as well. Is it trying to be an RPG with interesting role-playing opportunities and interesting dialogue choices? If so, it failed. The first act played out exactly the same way for 2 of my characters because the life paths do nothing but change the first 20 minutes of the game. There are no factions to speak of, and no reputation system where you interact with the various gangs in interesting ways. You don't define your character, the game defines it for you as an ambitious kid from the streets with a snarky attitude but a heart of gold. Which, sure, is about as interesting as a 4-hour-long Star Wars rant review on YouTube, but it's fine for a character to be, characterized by the developers. However, I don't want to be controversial, but an RPG should be about the character you built, not the character someone else built for you. Is Cyberpunk meant to be an open world filled with interesting activities and things to discover? If so, it failed. The activities are almost exclusively fixer side quests, which just revolve around killing some dudes in a place, and there's nothing to discover when you explore. What is Cyberpunk 2077? The marketing seemed to imply it was the second coming of Jesus Christ, but Lord and Savior is not a genre. Cyberpunk 2077 is an RPG without role-playing, a sandbox without interesting tools, and an open world without interesting exploration. Cyberpunk 2077 is very buggy, but you knew that, and honestly, I played on PC and they were not that bad for me. Listen, I like Skyrim. Todd emotionally broke me years ago, but what continues to grind my cyber gears with this game is not the bugs, but the oversights. It's the type of game that advertises the diversity of the in-game vehicles, yet makes buying them a massive pain in the ass because each individual car is a side quest, and none of the vehicles have measurable stats or one cohesive place where you can actually browse what's available. But all of this could be fine. Not every game needs to have great role-playing. Not every game needs great exploration. And not every game needs to be a fun sandbox. I mean, I haven't even talked about the combat. A game can be built exclusively around satisfying combat. So, there are a lot of weapons, they're all pretty splashy and have a satisfying kick to them, but the RPG elements make every enemy a bullet sponge, and they're also dumb as hell, so they just stand and wait to get shot in the face. Remember the mantis blades from the trailer? Those looked pretty sick, but turned out to be as interesting as a dry fart in a sandstorm. This is fine. An FPS RPG can totally have bad combat and still be good. That's to be expected. The RPG tradition of rifling through enemies' pockets for loot stops the roller coaster ride of any RPG combat system from gaining any momentum. Not to mention the bullet sponginess and the fact that RPGs are usually not very stable, so the AI constantly breaks. There are a few points in the game where you play as Wholesome 100 Silverhand, and it is a first-person shooter. You don't have an inventory, you can't search enemies, it is a straightforward, fast-paced corridor shooter, and honestly, it's pretty good. This gun kicks like a mule being given a prostate exam, and the AI actually behaves itself, probably because it doesn't need to account for a myriad of player actions. You cannot hack nor stealth around as Mr. Chungus. You can only kick bubblegum and chew ass, and it is pretty sick. Cyberpunk 2077 is a game that tortured me. It is a game that was constantly threatening to be great. A game that, when it settles down and focuses on doing one thing, is great. But then the rest of the game shows up again, and what is great drowns beneath the weight of all these half-baked mechanics and systems. Alright. The combat is bad, the story keeps breaking, the role-playing is nearly non-existent, the exploration is non-existent, the side quests are flooded with trash missions that serve only to pad the runtime, and I need to say it again. None of these things are deal breakers. Really, there's absolutely nothing wrong.
Yes, I was in the chess club.
Hey, you. Finally awake.
Skyrim is a weak-ass RPG. Absolute trash. Nice job, Todd. The leveling lacks interesting specialization, and the story unfolds the same way no matter what character you make. Not only do you not define the character you play as, no one defined the character you play as. It's the worst of both worlds, really. But it wasn't about being an RPG. Skyrim was about exploring interesting locations, and the RPG mechanics existed only to mechanically reward the player for exploration. At the end of every location is a chest filled with gold and items, and you got experience for clearing enemies out of these places. The RPG mechanics are weak in a vacuum, but they exist to support the exploration, which is great. It's fair to call Skyrim a shitty RPG, just like how it's fair to call Fallout New Vegas a shitty first-person shooter. But that doesn't exactly destroy those games with facts and logic because it's not what those games were about. I don't play Fallout New Vegas because I want to kick ass and take names. I play it so I can really fill the shoes of whatever character I created. Hot take, Fallout New Vegas is a role-playing game. The shooting in New Vegas and the RPG mechanics in Skyrim serve to support what the games are really about. Doom Eternal's story sucks. Saints Row has no atmosphere, it's just a bunch of copy and pasted buildings. Assassin's Creed isn't fun. But I don't play Doom Eternal for the story, I don't play Saints Row for the atmosphere, and I don't play Assassin's Creed for fun because it's not fun. Fuck those games. It's fine for a game to have weak or underdeveloped mechanics in its design. There is absolutely 100% nothing wrong with that. Skyrim's about exploration, New Vegas is about role-playing, Doom Eternal is about its combat, Saints Row is about its sandbox, Assassin's Creed is about Ubisoft trying to sell you shit. Cyberpunk 2077 is filled with systems and mechanics, but none of these systems are engaging. That's fine, but what do they serve? What is this game about? I want to judge the game by what it's trying to do, so what the fuck is it trying to do? The purpose of Red Dead Redemption was, of course, not to say that redemption is meaningless. I think it's fair to say that the intention of Red Dead Redemption was to illustrate the savagery of civilization. It was a critique of the American justice system doing nothing more than perpetuating a cycle of violence. It was an attempt to say, perhaps in this pursuit of justice we have lost the possibility of rehabilitation that would actually break the cycle of violence. And you know, I didn't buy it. I just did not buy that John should have been able to live out his days on a farm with his family. But he also should not have been murked in broad fucking daylight without due process. The game's story was far too black and white for me. Is justice mishandled by the government? Yeah, like constantly. But I felt like the game was just tossing the entire concept of justice in the trash. You can't just do whatever you want and get away with it. Unless you're rich, of course, then you can do absolutely whatever the fuck you want. I enjoyed Red Dead Redemption a lot. It's one of my favorite games of all time, but the message the story was trying to convey fell flat for me. John's pursuit of redemption did not come from a place of guilt, it came from a place of selfishness. A desire to pretend that he didn't need to be held accountable for his actions just because he was no longer a criminal. I know what the story of Red Dead Redemption was trying to say, but I did not believe it.
You borrowed money from my business partner, Herr Strauss. You owe him, you took the money. He wants it back, what's not to understand? Where's our money? I don't have it.
Yeah, I got TB. I got it. Beating a man to death for a few bucks.
Check clear.
Thomas!
What are you looking at?
Thomas!
I said what you looking at, woman.
My husband isn't well.
I guess
Dear Charity, get us the money.
I'm afraid.
Arthur's story works so much better for me than John's because his pursuit of redemption did not come from a place of trying to undo his past deeds. It came from his pursuit of purpose. He was dying, facing the truth of his own mortality, and it pained him to see that his life amounted to nothing. At the end of the story, he was not a good man because he was running away from his past. He was a good man because he wanted his past to mean something. And while most of the emotional impact is delivered through the story, the honor system does let the player feel Arthur's journey a bit better. The honor system, and the random events that influence it, is unchanged from the first game. But the story that justifies the honor system is so much more heartfelt. But that is where the problem comes in. This is where Red Dead Redemption 2 becomes less than the sum of its parts. It's an improvement on its predecessor when looking at certain parts of the game. A better game is in here. When you view the game as a whole, it's worse. If you want to retain maximum stamina and health regeneration, you need to eat and/or sleep. Your weapons need to be kept clean, your horse needs to be kept clean, your horse needs to be fed. You can take a bath, and don't worry, you have to individually wash each of your different appendages when taking a bath. Oh man, thank God. I was scared I was gonna lose my sense of immersion for a second there.
Nothing like a good bath, huh? Oh, please, no.
I don't want to speak for everyone, but I'm gonna power through and do it anyway. No one likes this. No one likes these long-ass animations, nor the need to eat and sleep. These things aren't just unnecessary. They make the game worse. They do not serve what the game is about. Somewhere along the way, during this game's development, the people making it forgot what the fuck this game was about. And so, the player forgets what this game is about. So much of this game does not improve the rest of what's here. These extra features are not a bonus. They stand between the player and the core of what this game is about. Hey, Mr. CD Projekt Red, so I've been working on that crafting system, and, it's just not working. What do you mean? You can craft stuff, right? Well, yes, but it doesn't make the game better. If anything, it makes looting enemies in locations more irritating because it increases the flood of loot that the player has to sift through. So why have I been coming in early and working late so I can work on this system when every other part of the game is on fire and we release in 3 days? Jerry, you see, this is why I'm the boss and you're a trash developer that doesn't matter. Here, just take a look at the design document for the game. This is just a napkin that says best game ever that has everything. And that's why we need crafting. Has it ever occurred to you that every other game usually focuses on just one or two things? Maybe we should have restrained our vision of this game and designed it around something as opposed to everything. Wait, restrained? You mean like how I restrain people to their desks and force them to work 80 hours a week on dumb bullshit that shouldn't be in the game? Yeah, like imagine restraining your, vision of what the game is supposed to be to a desk. Jerry, did I ever tell you that I made The Witcher 3? Every day, yes. Yeah, okay, so maybe you should shut the fuck up. I've asked you 8,000 times now, what is Cyberpunk 2077 about? It's not a good RPG, it's not a good shooter, it's not a good sandbox. When the credits rolled on Cyberpunk 2077, I found many great moments that were quickly spoiled by half-baked mechanics that served nothing. Oh sure, there were bugs aplenty, but there were also countless unexplored avenues of design. A cyber augmentation and hacking system that lacked depth, leveling that lacks depth, dialogue that lacks diversity, and a beautiful world that doesn't reward exploring it. When writing this video, I at one point was browsing the Cyberpunk 2077 subreddit. Somehow, my phone fell down and accidentally downloaded and opened Reddit onto this page. I assure you, I've never used the website before in my life. One of the most upvoted posts there, right now, is a list of features suggested by the community. It's a very long list, and I would like to make an addition to it. CD Projekt Red. If you're going to take some community advice, please take mine, because it's obviously the only advice that matters. I want you to take a look at this list of very cool sounding mechanics and say, no. I want to take a fucking hacksaw to this game. The fixer missions? Cut 'em. The leveling system, cut it way down, leave only half the perks at most. Jesus Christ, these things are useless. Crafting? Cut it. The 3 life paths? Cut it. The preposterously large and detailed open world? Cut a third of it off. Don't sacrifice the detail because it is great, but there's no reason for it to be this size. Why was so much time clearly spent on this open world if the player has no reason to explore it? But it's too late now. These aren't features that should be cut now, they should have been cut a very long time ago so that development time could have been better spent focusing on the RPG mechanics or action or story. Although it would be hilarious if they cut all that shit anyway, because the internet shitstorm would be beautiful. CDPR cuts more content. Cyberpunk 2077 is worse than ever before. Cyberpunk 2077 raped my cat and killed my dog. Must watch, gone sexual. And this is the problem. Players and designers fetishizing features when a game is not just a collection of features. What Cyberpunk 2077 needs right now is for CDPR to take a step back and decide, what is this game about? Are you ready for the spiciest of takes? Cyberpunk 2077 is not undercooked. It is overcooked. The game didn't need more time in development, it needed less. It needed less features and less content. If they were operating with less time and a smaller budget, CD Projekt would have restrained their vision of what the final product would be and developed the game accordingly. This game could have been a great RPG, a great cyberpunk crime sandbox, a great first-person shooter, a great non-linear story, but it cannot be all of them at once. Cyberpunk 2077's bugs will probably be fixed. This game will be redeemed in time. Maybe, with the DLC, they'll even focus in on the story that is stellar and stop trying to juggle so many things at once. But while Cyberpunk will be redeemed, redemption is not justice. Good deeds do not undo the past. I believe that the next few years at CD Projekt Red will be years of penance. Several years spent ironing out bugs and trying to finish these systems that serve nothing. They will try to escape their past and rebuild their reputation. And then there will be a headline on Kotaku about how Cyberpunk 2077 is great, and you should buy it again. Hell, maybe in a few months you'll somehow get your hands on a PlayStation 5 and think, why not? I'm sure it runs fine on the PS5. I swear to God, if any of you buy this game twice, I'll fucking kill you. You're not missing much. You're missing an atmospheric mess, a heartfelt dumpster fire of a game that does a million things poorly. The lesson to be learned from Cyberpunk 2077 has seemingly not been learned by the community. What I see most often discussed is what you would expect. Corporations are greedy. Yes, obviously, have y'all not figured that out yet? Labor laws exist for a fucking reason. Corporations would kill your children for money if they could, because they have done that. And they still do that. They would sell your sweet, sweet asshole to a horny stallion. Never forget that. That's not a lesson to be learned. That's rule 1 of capitalism. The real lesson, I think, to be taken from Cyberpunk is that a game is not just a list of cool-sounding features and mechanics. In pursuit of making a game that has everything, the something that makes a game special can easily be lost. Focusing on just a single thing or two in a game's design is not settling. There is nothing wrong whatsoever with an aspect of a game's design not being perfect. There's nothing wrong with a game that does not do everything perfectly. The problem, if anything, comes from trying to do everything, period. If you're cutting mechanics, features, or content when making a game, that's not failure, that's not giving up. That's focusing in on what makes your game great.
Light show.